This is your official welcome to the Outreach Leadership meeting for this week, in which we are discussing Monroe's nuanced relationship to channeling. Monroe comes at this probably more from our entrance as an institution to this whole area was originally from Bob's out-of-body practice. Bob went out of body. He wasn't a medium, he wasn't a channeler, and he certainly wasn't a New Age person by any stretch of the imagination. He eventually ended up in those spaces, but he ended up there by experience, not by having read some books and thought, ooh, this is needy keen. This is awesome. I think I'll go explore this. He was kind of dragged there kicking and screaming, maybe not screaming, but so we do cover the broad spectrum. So many of us are very woo-woo and very centric in that way. But there are many people in Monroe that are, I don't know, probably doubtful about things like mediumship and channeling. And they're like, I don't know about all this stuff. So we have a really broad spectrum of views on things like mediumship and channeling, as opposed to if you go to some other organizations where they might just all be probably more clearly of the same mind on a topic like that. So that's why I want to say nuance. We don't come in here assuming everybody feels the same way in a topic like this, the way we might say people generally feel a little bit more like exploring focus 10. I don't know, that seems a little more, I don't know if safe is the right term, but anyway, as of late, Monroe in the last couple of years has started to do more things with programs like Susan Giesman's mediumship series. So we have definitely started to dip our toes in the waters and do more things. What's interesting, and I think Candy as one of our guests is a perfect example of this, is we can say that we don't do a lot of official stuff in this arena, but once you start introducing people to these focus states and to out-of-body exploration, all bets are off, all the blinders are off, and people just start having mediumship and channeling experiences, like it or not. Here you come. Once you start exploring, things just happen. You can call it what you want to call it. Who cares? That's the beauty of what we do is, well, what is your experience? And then people come forward and they share that. So what I thought we would start with is, originally I was going to have Candy, myself, and Dolly kind of talk about our experiences and then talk about Monroe's relationship, etc. And I think what I'll do is I'll have us start with some of that, but I'm just getting a sense that there is more experience in this room like that. So this is going to be a richer conversation than if we just confine it to really the two of us and don't go out broader. So I want us to be sure that we get a lot more outside of just us in this particular conversation. So with that, I'd like to start with Candy, and then I'll explain a little more of my background and kind of where I come on this topic and so forth. But I'm very excited about this as a possibility for Monroe, almost coming out of the closet as on this topic to a degree. It's kind of something we've done. We just don't really talk about it, channeling and things like that. Even though we do it, it's like, oh yeah, of course we do it. We just don't talk about doing that because, just something that happens. Well, why don't we just be more open that we do stuff like that? Or not, I don't know. Candy, how about you? Go ahead. Let's start with Candy. Parvin, we'll definitely get to you. Don't worry. We always love hearing from you. You're fabulous and wonderful. And congratulations on your 17 anniversaries of your chapter meetings. That's amazing. Awesome. We'll come back to that too. Candy, go ahead.
Okay. And Parveen, yes, congratulations, 17 years. Fantastic for you. Mark, I started taking some notes. You're talking about, this defining whether we are mediums or whether we are channelers. And I've done a lot of things that other people have told me, oh, well, you're a medium. Well, I'm not a medium, but I do receive information from people who have passed away, and I can pass that information on. I never thought of myself as a channeler till people kept saying, oh, that's what you're doing. But I approached this, well, first of all, everything I've learned from mediumship and channeling, I can't wait to talk to someone who's taken Suzanne Giesman's course in mediumship. I never had any of that. After I started channeling, then I did take Bill Buellman's Out of Body Intensive, and I've taken some other, courses from Monroe, but nothing that was specifically addressing mediumship or channeling. But I can take a back step and take a look at the classes I've taken through Monroe, and I can tell how they've changed me. Any skills that I have in the metaphysical area, spiritual area, whatever we want to call it, I've gotten from Monroe Institute. That's just the way it is. Growing up, my mother was very psychic. I never did really understand that, but she just had something that was different than what other people had. She would have these feelings about something, and quite often they would come true. I was fascinated by these topics, but as far as me having any kind of psychic skills or abilities, no. Well, I found Monroe Institute and I started taking courses. These courses were great for other people because they could show other people how to tap into that aspect of themselves that they didn't know about. But it's like, no, not for me. I'm just the bystander because those things don't happen to me. Mediumship and channeling falls into the category of expanded awareness. Well, consciousness, what is consciousness? It is awareness. But once we become aware of consciousness, aware of awareness, then it becomes a tool that we can use for exploration, for, self-growth, maybe to help us lead, a more spiritual life. When I first started channeling, and that was spontaneous after I attended a program at Monroe, but the messenger spoke to me about something they called a point of existence. I like to think of that as a visual representation of consciousness. It makes it really easy to understand. So if you think of consciousness, imagine it as a dot. And that dot resides for most people deep within our physical bodies. It's very constricted. But it is so deeply embedded within us that most of us, and I was certainly one of those people, most of us think that we are our physical bodies. But once that dot starts to expand, then that's when the magic occurs. We can actually transform that dot into a field of awareness. And when we do, we can bend space and time. Now, as a psychologist, hearing myself say this, it sounds wacko, but this is what happened to me. Let's take a look at time. I used to think of time as a progression of our awareness. So think of that dot from one event to another, or maybe from point A to point B. So our point of existence, our awareness, travels along a straight path, a path that's logical, it's sequential, it's linear, it goes in one direction only. But no, that's not how time is. The messengers have told me that time is more like, so we're going to replace that straight line with the sine wave. Time is like a wavy curve. So now when we go to one event to the other, when we track our progression along that path, we see that things have become a little bit more complex, a little more complicated. That particle of awareness that travels on this sine wave can start to expand. And how does it do that? Monroe Institute. People who have had near-death experiences know about this, but we can choose to expand our consciousness through things like prayer, meditation, Monroe sound science, out-of-body experiences, shamanic ceremonies, lucid dreaming. But with this expansion of our consciousness, that tiny dot gets larger and larger, and it expands into a three-dimensional globe. Now, as we superimpose that 3D sphere on our time wave, our timeline, that's like a sine wave, we can literally see how expanded consciousness influences our perception of time. So as we cover more of the timeline, we can look into our past. And I'm not talking about last Tuesday, but maybe 2 lives ago, 3 lives ago, thousands of years ago. And we can also look into the future or the probabilities of what might happen. So learning to use our consciousness has a lot of practical applications. And the more we expand, the subtler our energy fields become. And in that field state, we are no longer tethered to the 3D world. We are no longer reliant upon just our limited physical senses. We tap into the fields of the non-physical, and we dip our toes into that energy of cosmic consciousness of all that is. So I don't want to talk too much, but that's how I see the skills that I have and how they relate to channeling and mediumship. And in a minute, I'd love to go through like some of the programs I've been to at Monroe and how that seems to fit into this model of consciousness that allows us to expand.
Candy, thank you. That was wonderful. That was a fantastic primer. I mean, gosh, wow. I feel like I couldn't have coordinated that better. Thank you. I'll just quickly tell a little bit of my own story on this topic and take it from a different direction. When it comes to my relationship with Monroe, with channeling, with all of these things, I encountered channeling pretty early on in my metaphysical journey. When I first encountered metaphysics, because I grew up very religious. I knew there was something more than just the physical. So for me, the idea of we are more than our physical body, that's never been that much of an impediment, because I've always believed. I remember being a little kid on the soccer field and looking up at the sky, as one might be on the soccer field when you're kind of bored and they're out doing whatever and you're like, whatever, and just looking, thinking, there is God, there's something out there. I was like 3 or 4, so wow, I mean, maybe older than that, but anyway. And I always felt really compelled in church and so forth, but I don't know. But in my first metaphysical studies and places like that, I would get these readings from this school metaphysics. And they would do spirit guide readings in which they would channel a guide. And I was amazed to see the transformation of this woman in front of me as she becomes Thomas James, my spirit guide. And she just suddenly takes on a whole nother persona as she becomes Thomas James and starts talking to me. And the words that came out of her mouth were words that were way beyond who she was. And yet they spoke to me personally about my life, my experience in that moment, that were so profound. They were the most profound words. And I'd grown up listening to a preacher who could speak to an audience as though he was your personal best friend, and was one of the most gifted ability communicators ever. And this woman, she was a pretty normal person, and she didn't know me from anybody. And I was just blown away at the transformation that came through. And when she was done, she was back to being this normal person. And there was literally a change as this happened. And then I went to other gatherings where I would see people, oh, I'm channeling Hecate. And she says, you're an asshole. I was like, that's you. You said I'm an asshole. And you said Hecate said that because you don't like me. I quickly started to tell the difference between that and that. I started getting, I could tell that difference. So I understood why there was some disdain for people who do mediumship or channeling, because yeah, some people are more gifted at it than others. We'll just leave it at that. So short circuit all that, came to Monroe, had the Monroe experience. We've all been through it. Everybody on this call has been through it. I don't know that I need to, go through how profound that can be and is for many and most people who go through it. I hadn't really planned on doing channeling. I was really excited they did mediumship. So I went to Suzanne Giesman's mediumship series. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do any of this. I didn't necessarily have any profound mediumship experiences. I wanted to. I met somebody there who wanted to study mediumship. And so he said, hey, let's start studying regularly. So we started doing weekly studies, found out he did channeling, which is what I'd always wanted to do. So I said, hey, will you teach me channeling? He said, oh yeah, I've done it forever. What? And so I started trying to learn how to channel. And it actually helped me transform physically, which is another discussion. But what I found over time with the channeling, and what really helped me, the one thing that just blew me away at guidelines, of all things, is there's a woman who was going to guidelines, and this was like her, I don't know, 12th time of going to guidelines, because she loved it so stinking much. She would just go to guidelines again and again and again and again. And she said that when she went to the Arthur Findlay College to study there, it's like one of the big spiritualist colleges in England. She said that what they often tell you is when you start to do spirit work, early on, if you don't come in supernaturally talented and you're developing your skills, as you develop this ability to channel or do mediumship or whatever it is, 90% is you and 10% is the other side. And what you're doing is you're upping that quotient. So you're trying to get it to the point where it's most or pretty much all the other side coming through. And that really, I don't know why that just finally turned a light on for me to get it to be like, oh, and gave me permission to understand that, you mean it doesn't have to be perfect every time? Some of you can be there while this is coming through. Oh, and it just helped me understand the nuance of how channeling and all of these things work. And so over time, that really helped me, so that where I am today in my relationship with channeling, etc., is I have a daily relationship with guidance that I will quiet my mind and be able to talk to guidance. And I can also do I can channel that guidance as well. And I don't know if we'll have time to do it, but I actually I thought about doing maybe delivering a message here, but I don't know that we'll have time at this point because there are just so many people here that I want to be sure we get stuff out, and Dolly's here too, so I want to hear Dolly speak. But I find that the key point in all of this that I will make is, I think the main thing I'm getting from my relationship with guidance is that we all have the ability to have that relationship. And that is so much more important than any other message that I think anybody could ever convey or give. If Monroe was going to teach anybody a skill, an ability, whatever it would be, that is that you have the ability to get your own answers to your own questions. Whatever, however you want to do it, whatever you want to call them, whether you call them Frank DeMarco's, the guys upstairs, whether you call them Fred and Sally, whether it's Jesus and Mary, whether, you know, whoever you want to call them, whether it's your mom and dad, whether it's you're a physical materialist and you say, I don't know about any of this stuff, but what I can be comfortable with is thinking of it as just a wise aspect of my own ingrained personality. That's fine. You know, you're not looking to somebody else to give you answers for your own life. You realize, I've got answers. I can figure things out. I am enough. I can do this. And just that empowerment is absolutely incredible. The difference it can make for you to know that can be the difference of helping people to be incredibly positive contributors to our society, to make a great difference, you know, in their own lives, in the lives of their family and their loved ones, in their communities, versus being the headlines you read about where you're just incredibly sad and deeply, you know, they're deeply tragic things. So I think those types of things are really what, to me, matter some of the most. And so I'm going to be quiet and let's move it on to Dolly. And Dolly, just to let you know, Candy has spoken. She's going to speak a little bit about later about some of the classes she has been at. We want to hear from you talking about your thoughts on the topic, but we're also going to open it to the floor because we've got a lot of people here who are itching to speak about this because we can. I've seen several people like, so we want to give them their time too. So please go ahead, Dolly. Tell us something that lets us know you, Dolly, like what's your relationship with mediumship and channeling, you personally, and then what do you think that connects with your thoughts on how Monroe connects with that?
Well, the first time I went to Monroe, I was not part of this spiritual group that would study mediumship and channeling. Then after that, I got involved with the organization of one of the many organizations based on Allan Kardec, books and teachings about mediumship and channeling. He never was a medium, he never was a channeler, but he wrote several books regarding, the process and what consciousness is involved, even though he didn't ever mention the word consciousness, but everything related to mediumship. So I start attending this group, practicing. I know that there is a line of thought that says, oh, you're born with it, you have it, or you don't. I don't believe in that. I believe that with the right guidance and the right intention and the right training, you can develop your skills in mediumship or psychic development or channeling. My experiences has been more like a medium. Sometimes I don't like to call it that way. I call it that I have the capability of perceiving, especially through my ears. And then I have my little thing, when I hear the information from my left side, what type of entity is talking, when I'm listening the information from my right side. Okay, and that has taken me, time to decipher, but at least it works for me. I practice every week with this group. And we do a lot of, I would call, important work with people that attend. And I believe I have said this before. We have this organization that we assist other people that cannot find solutions for certain problems in their lives. And our director is a professor at the university, studied in Harvard. He is a professor of hypnosis and very involved with this organization. And everybody that belongs, or I would say 70% of the people that belong or attend these organizations are, professionals that they understand that consciousness and there's something beyond just, our physical body. But to make this long story short, we have psychologists and psychiatrists that know the type of work that we do. And when they have situations with them among their clientele that also believe, because this also has to do with a lot of the belief systems, beliefs in spiritual world, and there are other components that can affect our daily life. They invite, they suggest to attend our group, and we assist these people. And through the process of mediumship and channeling, we have been able to find, I would say, the original cause of whatever ailment, emotional, physically, spiritual, that person is having. And that has helped me develop more and more, because there is an intention of helping another person. And that's the way I see it, and I have, because I also read a lot of Edgar Cayce, and we have a study group. That's also something that he always said. Your intention is what really makes the difference. And if you have these capabilities, put it into good work. I would add here, make it something of value, like Monroe Bob said, use it for somebody else. And that's what our group has been doing, and I've been doing, and I'm so grateful about with that. At the beginning, for me, it was kind of for me, it was a surprise, because I didn't know I could develop these skills. But again, with practice, they do develop. And in regards to the Monroe, how I tie that, I would say that goes together. What I've been learning through these other organizations, it could be the ARE or the INESIP, the other one that I attend to. But it goes hand by hand with what Robert Monroe brought into the table, even though he called it differently. He used other types of words, but I would say it's the same thing. And again, the most important thing is that your intention. I believe a lot of channeling your own knowing, intuition. We have a lot of information in ourselves. We have a lot of information that we can tap to. I believe in past lives. This is not the only life that I have lived. So I have a lot of information that, even though I might not know it, I know it. So that's where knowing comes, And but definitely the Monroe Institute has helped me a lot in giving me that additional confidence, that I don't have to see it through a religious, how you say it, lupa. How you say lupa when you magnifying glass? I don't have to see it through those glasses. I can see it more as a consciousness, awareness approach, and that's till now. That's all I'm going to say. If you have any questions, I can ask.
Dolly, that's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And that actually went really well with what Candy started with when you just talked about the consciousness and the awareness. It tied beautifully into what she had said. So I think this is amazing. I just quickly wanted to define, Parvin said she was a little confused about the difference between channeling and mediumship. And actually, a lot of people have that question. And I would say, it's not, yes, people will say, oh, well, it's a clear difference. This is this and this is this. Don't let anybody tell you that it's absolutely one or the other. They're in general terms, channeling is the idea of embodying an energy that comes into you and it speaks through you. Most of the time when someone says, oh, I channel, That's generally what they
Mediumship.
mean. Is something comes into them and the spirit energy would come through them and they would start talking, and I would suddenly be, I'm channeling Marie Antoinette. I would speak to you as Marie Antoinette. I am now Marie Antoinette. Hello, today I'm Marie Antoinette. That would be traditionally regarded as channeling. A medium, however, is traditionally, now everyone's gonna, and there are nuances and people are like, no, I don't agree with that definition, and that's fine, but often a medium is a medium. If you think of how you use a term outside of this, it's a medium for that. A spirit of someone who has passed is somewhere else or somewhere, and the medium, it's kind of like they're in the room or they're somewhere, and the medium hears them talk. And it's kind of like you're in a room together, and like you might be sitting here, the spirit entity is over here, and I'm hearing them talk, and I might say, oh yes, well, your aunt who's right over here to my left is telling me that such and such and so and so. And it's almost like they can see the invisible person in the room, but they don't necessarily have your aunt in their body speaking to you, like through their lips. Like their aunt isn't, they're not channeling your aunt. Now, it gets complicated, of course, and you cross the streams and all of that, and there'll be people who tell you that if you're a channeler, you are a medium, but if you're a medium, you're not necessarily a channeler, or I get all that stuff confused, and I don't know that I think that part is quite as important as understanding that. And there's a new book that comes out from Helene, which we'll discuss in the next meeting, in which she talks about the art of, or the science of channeling, in which she expands the term channeling to cover pretty much the whole range. She just uses it to cover all of our, I'll call them psi experiences. So then she just basically confuses all of the terms together, however you get non-physical awareness of things. So fine. But Parvin, does that make a little more sense to you about how people are often using those terms? Candy has a different way. I don't know if Candy, when she embodies, when she does her channeling, I've never seen her talk about doing it out loud, but I know Candy, when she channels, she's channeling the spirits, because it's in a way like automatic writing is kind of channeling, because they're literally writing through you as you write that stuff. And I know Dolly has something to say on it. Let's do Dolly. Let's get a quick word from Candy about the courses, and then let's open the floor, because I know there are a lot of people that have a lot of things to say. So while those things are going on, let's see a show of the, if you have your participant buttons or wherever it is, raise your electronic hands so we can then, I'll start figuring out who wants to talk, and we'll get you lined up for talking. So go ahead, Dolly, and then Candy.
Yeah. In regards to channeling, depending on the philosophy that you're studying with, mediumship, you can have the mediumship like you just described it, or the medium that also it's receiving and puts its body aside and allow this entity or energy system display itself through the body, through that person's body. That's one thing in regards to channeling. But the other thing that I wanted to say is that sometimes people put too much emphasis on Marie Antoinette, it's telling me this and this and this, and they will always come with famous people. None of these people will ever come with the guy at the corner that was selling the gasoline. That's when you have to be very careful when they come with all these, like, oh, I have Thomas Jefferson coming over, or I have Washington, or I have, no, when you have to be very, very careful when they say that they're channeling, blah, 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 blah. And one of the reasons is you never know if that entity already reincarnated. So if that entity already reincarnated, of course, for those that believe in reincarnation, how can you be channeling that person with information from, Jefferson is telling me from in the future, such and such thing. So, when somebody comes with a famous name, I really take it with a grain of salt,
And I would take everything with a grain of salt, just in
course,
general, just like you would any advice. Like if your mother's giving you advice, do you ever just say, oh, yes, mom, whatever you say, I will obey you without question? When the hell do you do that?
Yeah.
You all,
So,
same thing.
yeah, but that's we have to be very careful about that. How many people embody Cleopatra? You know. So that's the reason why we have to be very careful when it comes to that. Who I'm really channeling. And the other thing, I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit longer in regards to automatic writing. We also have to be very careful. Who are we allowing to express itself through our writing? There's another way to express it instead of being automatic and just allow anybody come through. There's this, what they call, in the ARE uses that term a lot, inspirational writing.
Good point.
You let your inspirational writing. Of course, there are other energies that will come and help you and get inspired. And yes, you can have that automatic writing, but you have to be very careful who you are really allowing to channel or automatic write through your hands. So.
All right, let's go to Candy, and then I see Parvin, and then Brian, because Brian raised his hand physically.
Let me just say what I do when I channel. I don't trans channel. I'm fully aware, but the information comes to me like dictation. It's very specific, and I hear when to bring a new paragraph, how to end a sentence. My voice might change a little bit, but I'm still basically just me, and I'm allowing the information to come through. But one thing, Dolly, that you say is so important is we don't want just anybody or anything to come through us. Discernment is so important. And this is why when I look at all of these phenomena, I don't necessarily think in terms, Parveen, of this is channeling and this is mediumship. To me, it's all about that expansion of consciousness and awareness. Because once we step outside of the physical body, our energy fields are much finer, and we can start picking up the information that we can't with our physical senses. This is why I think what Monroe has done, and I've not taken any courses from Giesman before on how to do mediumship. This is just what I've experienced. But Gateway Voyage, think about that. It's perfect. It teaches us that we are more than our physical bodies. And that is so key. But from Gateway on, we start collecting tools. Take a look at guidelines. We are starting to put those tools to interact with the non-physical to use. In guidelines, we seek a non-physical connection. We seek guidance. So we're starting to learn how to focus these new tools. Lifeline. That's when we meet and use our non-physical guides, and we have them help us. We call on them to help us as we help others cross over. Timeline was one of my favorites. In Timeline, you actually learn how to manipulate, what I showed earlier about when you expand your awareness, more of that timeline floats within that sphere. So we learn how to manipulate what we think is linear time. If we go to Exploration 27, that's when we're using that consciousness, that expanded awareness to explore. We're not seeking something specific like a guide, which is probably easier to do, but we zoom around and we use these tools to explore. Heartline, I loved Heartline. In Heartline, we learn about the wisdom of the heart and how the heart is a portal. It's an energy connection to those realms of spirit. But that's when discernment comes in. We learn to listen to our heart for the wisdom. So if information comes to us, is that something that is safe and protected and we feel good about? If not, we push it aside. MC squared, manifestation creativity squared. When Joe Gallenberger designed that program, it's all about the heart and the wisdom of the heart. But now we start to manifest, and we see the manifestations, whether it's through a roll of a dice or bending metal, spoon bending, lighting fluorescent bulbs with our hands, but it's using our heart and intention to do these things, like make seeds sprout. Then we get to things like energy medicine. Now we're really putting the tools into practice. We are manifesting wellness for ourselves and for others. We learn about the importance of crystals that Brian shows us in amplifying and guiding energy. Let's get to star lines. We explore the galaxies. And maybe we learn that guidance takes on different forms than what we had thought about. Maybe it's a swirl of a mist, a shaft of light. Maybe it's even an alien encounter. Then OBE and NDE spectrum, once again, now we're going all the way back to the beginning of Bob's affirmation that tells us that we are more than our physical bodies. We are that spectrum within the non-physical realms. When we get outside of ourselves and we change that dot, that point of existence, into a field, then we are the energy of all that is. And just all these worlds of perception open to us because we see who we truly are, which is more than our physical bodies. So thank you.
Candy, that was fantastic. Before we move on, we're going to do Parvin, Brian, Barbara. I just very quickly want to add one tiny point, and that is about I was talking to a friend of mine who's a medium yesterday, and this just quickly reminded me, when you're talking about not just allowing anything to come through, one of the great things about Monroe, and I think that we talk about a lot, is intention. Intention's really important, because what I noticed with her is she doesn't experience negative entities at all. She said, they don't live in my bailiwick at all. Like I don't ever encounter them. In my universe, they don't even exist. Now, that doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that for her, they don't, because she doesn't even allow for that type of thinking where she lives. And you'll find that in a lot of channeling and mediumship work is where you put your focus, where you have your intention. That's the type of entities that are going to be there. If you're donning battle armor and going out to fight the evil entities, you will find them. Very likely, and you can find the biggest, ugliest, baddest ones if that's what you're looking for. If that's not what you're looking for and you want peace and quiet, you can probably find that too. So it's pretty important to be clear about your intentions with things like that. And I will zip it. Parvin, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll go quick then. Something very funny happened this morning. I have a rental property. I have to change the dishwasher. I'm making a story. Since yesterday, I went 3 times to Home Depot. This morning, again, I go to Home Depot. I was so pissed off. And I started saying, all of a sudden, I started talking to the universe. I said, I had it. I hate this. I don't want to do this. And, all of a sudden, a voice said, you are in 3D life. This is, or something like, this is how the 3D is. You're in 3D. And I was shocked. I said, oh my God, you're right. I am in 3D. I got to deal with dishwasher. I find it so amazing. I know we are talking here. And so I call that channeling, right? Now, another story, a few months ago, a friend lost their son. You know, all these pills the college kids are taking, the kid dropped it. And I'm going fast. And the father is traumatized. And they live in Atlanta. And I put a meditation through Zoom. We listen to meditation, and all of a sudden, at the end of meditation, I meditated too. So I feel like the son sent a message. I don't know. All of a sudden, I heard something, and I told the father. And he said, Parveen, that's what my son was saying all the time. I got goosebumps right now. That's it. So I guess you call that mediumship. I was shocked myself.
That's, yes, I'll just say that.
The way it is. Yeah.
Brian, thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you beautifully.
Okay. I'm on my iPhone instead of my computer, which has demons, which I'll have, we'll exercise right after. You know, it's kind of interesting because I live in both worlds. You know, in medicine, they don't want to hear your channeling or getting downloads about their issues, which turn out to help tremendously. And at the same time, that's one of the reasons I love the Monroe Institute is you can just be yourself and everything's cool. And so there's a Jesuit priest whose name I won't mention, who's actually approved by the Vatican for exorcisms. And it's a term he hates. He calls it dealing with negative energy. He's just the coolest guy. He's in his 80s now. But we would go together. We get called to all these places around the world, literally. And there was a high school in Iceland that 4 students were murdered at the bottom of a stairwell. And all kinds of horrible things were happening on a constant basis. So we go in there at night. We ask them to keep the lights off. And we immediately identify the location where there's negative energy. We don't tell them what it is. Both of us have a good idea. And as I like to say, do the voodoo that we do so well. And the next day, all people avoided the stairwell. The energy changed dramatically. We escorted them to the light, and it's sort of gave me a whole new outlook because we've been to a number of places, and each time things improve. And as far as Jesuits go, they are like the Marines of Catholicism, and he's just the kindest, gentlest person. And I think he's the only one with more crystals than I have. And just a wonderful energy healer. So it's really nice to see all these different aspects. And as we become more aware, and as people get less reluctant and more willing to come out to the public with what they're doing, you know, everyone thinks of The Exorcist with exorcism. It's really more, you know, escorting negative energies to the light. Very that. And I'll let someone else speak.
Thank you, Brian. Well, Barbara, in the 1 minute we have left, you want to take us out, and then we'll just close out.
I was just going to say, Mike, it was an experience I had that actually got me to the Monroe Institute in the first place. And I was giving a presentation, an international presentation to a big group. And my notes disappeared just bore I started giving the presentation. So I didn't have anything. And I was called up to the podium, And I mean, I don't read from notes, but you know, you like to have them there as a, you know, and
Okay.
as I walked up to the podium, I'm just thinking, oh, and I just said, come on, guys, you know, I need some help. And as soon as I got to the podium, I wasn't speaking anymore. Somebody else was speaking in my voice, or ish, because I was apparently speaking very, very slowly. I could see the audience, I could hear the words. I couldn't follow exactly what the words were, but that was all occurring. And at the end, everybody said, oh, that was amazing. You know, could you explain? I didn't know what I'd said. So I had to go and disappear off somewhere and just say, oh yeah, it was, you know, I'm just going to take a little bit of a break. And I found something, what did I say? But anyway, that was, so it's the allowing, you know, I was given the opportunity to allow it to happen in that moment of almost desperation, but also trust. And it was allowing the allowing to come in. And that's what got me, because I didn't know what I'd done. So, and that's how I came to the Monroe Institute in the first place, trying to find out answers.
Yeah. Well, and with that, unfortunately, we're going to have to, I'm going to stop the recording.